Some of you have asked me about the alien topic again, and I've got my notes ready. I've got the X-Files theme song playing in the background, and this is a show that I want to tell you guys it's not so much science fiction as you think it is. It's more science reality than you would think, okay? And for instance, I just got back into watching it again. This is season 7, episode 1, and you can see the alien ship in the background. Now this wasn't a real ship, but it's based off real events, so to speak. Season 7, episode 1, called The Sixth Extinction. And this ship, whenever Mulder and Scully would get close to it, Mulder would become, I don't want to necessarily say possessed, but it made him have mental abilities beyond which his physical body could take. So he was basically dying in essence, and they didn't know how to preserve his life because he had psychic abilities that were just way off the charts. But other people were being possessed by it. So there were things that you couldn't explain when you got too close to this ship out in West Africa on the show, okay? And the only way they could contain Mulder was by injecting him with this drug. I think it was called phenolin or something like that, Phenelin, I believe. And it would make it to where his brain could actually process. Otherwise, he was just overload to the max. But the reason I bring this up is because it was perfect timing for us to be watching this episode. So in real life right now, Jake Barber, I don't know if you guys have been keeping up with this. There's a man named Jake Barber who about 3 months ago came out and said that he got really close to a Tic Tac shaped UFO, a white one. And when he got close to it, he said he became possessed, that his body was being taken over by, I guess, demonic influences. And he started crying and breaking down, and because he didn't understand what this feeling was. He wasn't in control of his thoughts. It was psychic abilities. Well, now Jake Barber's back in the news. This week, he's come out and said, basically, you can summon these entities by calling upon them, essentially. And for those of you guys who remembered my story, I won't go into detail because I've talked about it several times already, but in the Army 4 years ago, well, 5 years ago almost, in 2020, I saw a UFO ship just sitting there. Well, I had asked Indrid Cold if he was real, if he would show up, and there it was. I had 2 witnesses with me. Now, I'm going to talk about Indrid Cold later, but right now I want to get into everything on the UFO topic, okay? So, see you guys have tuned in. Thanks for hopping in. This is going to be a really good video. And if you have any questions, just ask me and I'll answer them. If you don't want to ask them now, you can put it in the comments later. This video is going to go live at 9 o'clock tonight. Now, let me go ahead and shut this theme song off so it doesn't distract. Okay. Now, let's talk about Phil Schneider. I've already talked about him before. For you guys that are really into the aliens, so Phil Schneider was a government contractor, black budget type. He was a geologist, and as a small child, he was given minerals, alien minerals. And he said that there are, I believe, 109 periodic elements to the table. He says it goes way, way, way above that. They don't teach you this stuff in schools, but basically the ones that are above, and I might be wrong, but I think it's 109, that they're alien materials, not from this world. And he was in possession of some of those. Well, he was given some of them by his own father, Oscar Schneider. So who is Oscar Schneider? Well, Oscar Schneider is a German Nazi type, but he didn't disclose who he was until 2 weeks from his death. He was on his deathbed, and he called his son Phil Schneider, and he says, listen, I've got to tell you something. He said, I'm not who you thought I was all these years. He said, my real name's Oscar Schneider, and I'm actually part of Nazi Germany. So this was essentially part of, I think it was a little bit before Operation Paperclip. I think Operation Paperclip happened, I want to say 1945, and I think Oscar Schneider came to the United States in 1941. Well, there's a reason for it. So hypothetically speaking, he may have been involved in the Philadelphia experiment with the USS Eldridge. And for you guys that don't know about the Philadelphia experiment, there's a man by the name of Al Bielek. And you can find both Schneider and Al Bielek on different YouTube channels. The one that comes to my mind is Channel 3X, where it's ad-free, uninterrupted. They talk for at least an hour on these videos, and it's amazing. Well, Al Bielek, and this is what's going to blow your minds, Al Bielek was involved in the disappearance. So the ship became invisible to both sight and radar. And the Navy, our Navy, United States Navy, was just trying to get it to be invisible to radar because we were in a war with Germany at the time. Now, as you guys already know, we won the war with Germany. Long story short, but Nazi Germany was actually in working with the extraterrestrials directly. They were reverse engineering spacecraft. A lot of those crafts have now been put under the ice in Antarctica, and you wonder why are we not allowed to travel to Antarctica? Well, there's your main reason. There's a lot of ships under the ice, and now that they're saying it's global warming, it's not really global warming. What's going on and why we're getting this mass heating is because of the planet Nibiru, and I've talked about this before. So, planet Nibiru is a huge planet. It's roughly the size of Jupiter, I'm guessing, and it's not gaseous, but it's terrestrial, it's rocky. So, as this planet comes closer into our neck of the woods in the solar system, our Earth's core is heating up. You say, what's happening? Well, I'll tell you what's happening. So, if you've been catching the news lately, you know the mass animal die-offs that have been happening in the oceans. And also there are creatures that are, we otherwise thought as prehistoric or ancient creatures. They're now being found, some of them in our oceans. Some of them are washing up on shore and people don't know what they are. They're saying we thought this was extinct. Well, what's going on is since our core is being superheated by the approach of this planet, a lot of nickel is being released through vents underground, subterranean vents and stuff, and it's an overabundance. And with the heat, it's driving a lot of these sea creatures that are way down at the bottom, it's driving them up. And with the nickel, it's making a lot of sea creatures die. So that's why we're seeing a lot of mass animal die-offs in our oceans right now. Look it up on the news, it's a real thing. It's the overabundance of nickel. Now, it's happening a lot in the Pacific Ocean right now, but it's happening all over the world. Now, if you guys have been paying attention, what's been going on lately? Earthquakes. And we're talking mega earthquakes. You guys heard about the one in Thailand, Japan? These are big, big earthquakes, and they're bigger than what we're accustomed to seeing. Now, yes, we get some here and there, but the last year or so, we've had a lot. Well, it's because our Earth is being seismically inundated by what I believe to be the approach of planet Nibiru. Now, Phil Schneider talked about that a little bit in one of his lectures. He talked about planet Nibiru. He said that he had heard that it was supposed to come around 2059 at the latest. Well, it's 2025 right now. You got to understand that this thing's not just going to come like right now. It's going to slowly approach into our neck of the woods, and as it does, it's throwing all these comets and asteroids at us. Also, pay attention to the news. Did you notice that they're talking about the asteroid that's supposed to be hitting us next year? They're saying it could pass between the moon and us, and I think it's called asteroid 2024 because that's when it was found. Well, that's probably being pushed over by this giant planet, okay? So there's a lot going on right now, and before long, they're not even going to be able to hide what's coming. Now, I theorize that the spraying of our skies, in which 32 states, including my home state now of West Virginia, is on a list, on board as saying we don't want our skies sprayed. Part of what they're doing is hiding what's going on. Part of it, and my mom actually found this today, is that we are now testing all-time high for barium. It already was happening for aluminum. Now barium. Check it out. It came in the news today. It's very, very high, and they're saying that this could either be one of two things. It could be intentional to try to poison the populace, or two, it could be the result of a nuclear attack out there in our skies. Seems more likely they're probably poisoning us. This is happening in Florida right now. Check your news. It is on, oh gosh, Mike Adams, the health ranger. He posted it on his site if you want to know where to go to find it. But back to Phil Schneider. So Phil Schneider, I told you his dad was Oscar, and he divulged on his deathbed 2 weeks before he died who he was. Well, Oscar Schneider probably was working with this other guy, Alfred Bielek, his dad. Okay, so Alfred Bielek has a very long story, and I suppose I'll get into it now. I'll try to give you the shortest, truncated version I can. I probably listened to, I don't know, 7 different hours of videos on him many times, and I've compiled my notes together. So Al Bielek, like I said, was involved in the Philadelphia experiment. He wasn't born Al Bielek. He was born Alexander Cameron Duncan Jr. And his brother was Duncan, was his first name. So he was born Alexander, his brother is Duncan, and they were recruited to get on board the USS Eldridge, which is that Navy ship out in the Philadelphia harbor, to pull the switches. Now, you say, what do you mean pull the switches? Well, there was a big experiment or a project out there that involved the work of Nikola Tesla, Albert Einstein, and the world's top mathematicians, including many of them from Germany. And they got together and they designed these 4 Tesla coils. And that was one of Tesla's famous inventions. He had a lot, but they had these 4 Tesla coils they put underneath on the USS Eldridge. Now, the maximum wattage that you can have, or I should say amperage, amps and watts are a different thing. The maximum amperage that your AM radio stations can put out is 50 million. Now, each of these Tesla coils was throwing out 200 million amps each, and they were pulsed. Nikola Tesla knew how to make them pulsed. So you've got 4 Tesla coils on the bulwark of the USS Eldridge in their pulse, so that's throwing out upwards of 800 million amps. So what happened, long story short, is basically when they flipped the switches for this to go live, that there were 5 sailors who became fused into the deck and the bulwark of the USS Eldridge. Like literally, their bodies got fused into the metal. Some of you may know this already, and some of you have never heard this story, and that's okay. One of those 5 soldiers, or sailors, not soldiers, it's a sailor. One of those 5 sailors was actually the brother of Alexander and Duncan Cameron. His name was James. He called him Jim for short. And Al Bielek, as he's telling the story of when he was Alexander, basically he said that my brother Jim was crying and dying as he was fused into the bulwark of the ship. So you've got that going on. Well, they couldn't flip the switches. They got stuck. So basically what's going on, they jumped overboard. And as a result, they thought, since the ship was invisible to both sight and radar, they couldn't see the water, right? So they thought the water would still be there, it's just invisible. Well, they jumped over it, they never felt water. What happened was they jumped into a time tunnel. So now you've got Al Bielek as Alexander Cameron Duncan Jr. He is involved in invisibility. He's involved in time travel, basically. He jumped into a time tunnel. Well, where did he end up? This is where it gets really good. He ended up in 40 years in the future at the very edge of Montauk Island, New York. Now, some of you guys know about Montauk Island. There's the Montauk Monster that is actually still frozen in time out there. It's stationary, and it is on the edge of Montauk Island. Now, the way Al Bielek explained it is that, you can't see it with your eyes, but you can see it with like a camera. I tried looking on Google Earth. I couldn't see it from a satellite image, but he says it's there. And the Montauk Monster basically was a representation of psychic abilities. It was these people who manifested it with their minds. And what happened was the government was involved in a lot of black budget projects. Well, out there is an old army base called Camp Hero. It's not functional anymore, but Camp Hero, you'll look it up on a map, it's still there. And there's stuff underground. Well, this base was very massive, and they had captured a lot of psychics, people who were able to use their minds. They hooked them up to chairs and stuff. Well, what happened was these psychics generated somehow this monster in our 3-dimensional space as we know it. It interacted with people, it threw them up against walls, it rampaged about, and for some reason, it got caught up in a hyperspace bubble, and it's just frozen in time, much like the USS Eldridge was. That ship was just sitting there. So these guys show up, Alexander and Duncan, Cameron Jr., they show up, right, 40 years in the future, and they don't know what's going on. They don't know it's the future. They're on the beaches of Montauk Island. Well, there's a helicopter overhead, and it's shining headlights down on them, right? And they're like, what the heck is going on? They didn't know what a helicopter was. They were just invented in 1943. Well, this is where it gets fascinating. So this story, the Navy gave them a hard date of August 12th of 1943 for the USS Eldridge to go live with the Invisibility Project, right? and you ask yourself, why that date? Well, he asked the same question. He never got an answer. Came all the way from the top admiral. He said, I don't understand. But nonetheless, they did it on August 12th of 43. They jumped down in the time tunnel where they thought the water would be, ended up on the beaches of Montauk Island. 40 years in the future, it's August 12th of 1983. Now, why is that strange to me? I happen to be born August 10th of 1983, just 2 days or a day and a half before these guys happen to be involved in a time traveling incident. So I thought, what are the odds? I mean, wouldn't it have been something if I was actually born on August 12th? Who knows? But that's what happened. And to this day, I still don't know why that happened to be the benchmark date. But it's going to come up because Al Bielek traveled forward and backward in time from that date, August 12th of 83. Well, when they showed up at Montauk, they encountered the helicopters and a bunch of army guys at Camp Hero, and they surrounded them with guns. They said, you got to come with us. So they put him down in an elevator. They went all the way down several floors under Camp Hero at Montauk Island, and they encountered this guy with white hair. And he says, welcome, gentlemen. We've been expecting you. And he says, what? What do you mean? We don't know where we are. He said, well, I'm Captain James Van Neumann, I believe was his name, German guy. And they said, that's impossible. They said, you were just with us on the ship on the USS Eldridge. He says, I know, you're 40 years in the future. They didn't believe it. They thought he was crazy. Well, it really was him. So that's just the beginning of Al Bielek's time travel experiences. Now, to give it real short to you, he did go in the future to the year 2137. And he also went in the future much later than that into the 28th century, which I think was like the year 2700 something, I don't know. 600 years later is what he said. And to give it to you real quick on what life was like, in the 21st century, in 2137, he said that there was no more government. He said the water had encroached all the way around the United States, and many of the cities were gone. He said most of San Francisco was gone, Atlanta was gone, Baltimore was gone, New York was partially there. He said that there were parts of New York, the Bronx and Long Island were gone, but he said the inland part was still there. Again, this is the year 2137. He didn't pay much attention to Canada. He said Europe was vastly underwater in parts, but he said the highlands of Scotland were still there. He said some of the Alps actually had gotten underwater. Now, my theory is that the approach of this planet is probably superheating the Earth and melting the ice caps and probably displacing the water over the land. It makes sense to me, right? They're coming out and saying it's global warming. It's really, yes, the Earth is warming, but it's not from all the pollution. It doesn't require all the money. It's because of something else. So that lines up with what he's saying for the year 2137. He said there's no government. He said that pretty much everybody's kind of living in harmony. Well, somehow he got sent in the future again. He doesn't know by whom. And every time he gets sent forward or backward, they do a brainwashing. You remember the movie Men in Black where they have the neuralizers? They hold it like this and they flash you. Well, I can't say that that's what they use for sure, but I do know for a fact, and he talks about it, Al Bielek does, when they give you a brainwashing, they inject you. And he did say the name of it, I can't remember. But they will inject you, and that's part of how they erase and wipe your memories. He's had it done several times, and he's had to piece a lot of this together after the fact. So Al Bielek's story is very fascinating. It's the only story to date that actually encompasses that of Phil Schneider that I have read about. Now, you guys know about other alien abductees and experiencers like Betty and Barney Hill, and there's several of them. You know my story of Tanya, who passed away 2 years ago in May, of Indrid Cold. And very briefly, I will recap the Indrid Cold story for you. So Indrid Cold is one of the good ones. He's a humanoid. He looks just like us. He's got very tan skin. His hair was slicked back. What makes this story so fascinating is that it happened right here in Parkersburg, where I live, on Interstate 77. And I actually recorded the spot where it happened. It's not very far outside the city at all. Well, her dad, Woody Derenberger, or Woodrow, he was called Woody for short, basically, he was the only one that pulled over. Indrid Cold and his spaceship with Carl Ardo and Demo Hassan, the two spacemen who were traveling with him tried to pull over a few other motorists, but nobody would stop. They were too scared. Well, Woody was scared, so here comes Indrid Cold out of the ship, and he's talking, but he's not moving his lips. He's talking telepathically. And he says, "Do not be, why are you scared?" He says, "Do not be afraid. We mean you no harm." He says, "I am a searcher." Well, basically, he was looking for somebody to be able to advocate to the rest of the world about what they were. And Indrid Cold supposedly came from the planet Lanulos in the constellation Ganymede. Now, some people have countered that. I fully believe the story. But I know that he wasn't crazy. I know a lot of people thought he was, but when this happened, it was big news. It was world news. Well, the next day, he got an interview on WTAP television. That's the TV program or station that's here in Parkersburg. And you can check that out. I'm going to post a link to that here. I think you can tell the guy's not lying. Most people will come out and say that, well, we can tell he had that initial experience, but everything after when he went up with Indrid Cold in his ship to the planet of Lanulos is a lie. Well, I don't believe it is, because I think they entered wormholes. So there's a lot of space travel going on that way. And that story covers a lot of other stories. So who else do you got in the extraterrestrial or alien lore? You've got Val Valiant Thor. Val Valiant Thor, it's been theorized he's come from either Venus, but I think, and this is what Schneider said, he likely comes from the Orion complex, somewhere out in there, like Orion's belt, somewhere out in there. And the thing about Val Valiant Thor is, to my knowledge, he's still alive. He's still here. The government basically has him captive. And he's got one giant iron lung. Well, I don't want to say iron, but it's a giant lung. And he's got one huge oversized heart. He's got about roughly a 1200 intelligence quotient. He can speak roughly 12 languages that we know of. And his blood is not like our blood. It's nitric oxide, which is like octopus blood, or there are other sea creatures that have nitric oxide for blood. And apparently that's what his blood is made of. He's also one of the good ones. But our government, being the way it is, has captured him. Well, Phil Schneider would come out in some of his lectures and say, the government has more than just that. They've got reptilians, or Dracos. And he actually got to experience talking with a reptilian that was held captive by our black budget government. And that is in one of his lectures. Basically, with the reptilians, he said this environment, they had it heated to about 120 degrees. Most humans can't really withstand that, not comfortably anyway. And it makes sense because reptilians are cold-blooded, right? Well, the reptilians and the grays, the 3.5 foot types and the 7 foot types, these are more extraterrestrial alien species that I've talked about before. They're under our ground right now. Literally right now. Have been far longer than humans have been. And yes, there is possibly some genetic tampering by the Greys on behalf of Cro-Magnon man that may have developed into Homo sapiens sapiens. It's very possible. I can't prove that for a fact, but it seems theorized by a lot of smart people. Now, what's going on with the reptilians and the Greys? They're not your friends. They're very evil. A lot of people would equate them with demonic. They could be demonic. Basically, what's going on is we are not top of the food chain. They are. And when you find a lot of people coming up missing, this has happened a lot out west. There are a lot of underground alien bases out west. And this is in the days of Phil Schneider. He came face to face with two 7-footers, the gray types. And he killed 2 of them with a handgun. He often says it's with a Walter PPK pistol. It has a 9-clip in it. He emptied the 9-clip, put another clip in. Didn't kill both of them right away. Then he finished the job. Well, he said these aliens, basically, they had like a amulet or a plaque. He called it a plaque right here. And somehow they activated it. They had technology that we can't even fathom. This was back in 1979. It was called the Human-Alien War. Schneider happened to be involved in it, and he didn't know what was coming. There were 66 black and green berets down there, and that's the only reason he's alive today is because a black beret saved his life by putting him up in a scissor lift, and it put him up. Put him up in the basket, and up he went. That guy gave his life so Phil Schneider could live to tell his tale. That alien that attacked him, it shot out a particle beam of, he said it was emerald green plasma, and it opened him up right in the middle, right down the middle, and all the way down, basically to his genital area. It cinched his toenails off. He got cancer from it. He had to go in radiation treatment for half a year, I believe, after that. Basically, he started telling his story. Al Bielek met up with him because they started to find out that their fathers may have hung out in accordance with the Philadelphia experiment on the USS Eldridge. Phil was the one that heard about Al Bielek, and he says, wait a minute. My dad, Oscar Schneider, told me he was involved with the USS Eldridge. So that's how those two got to meeting. Well, Al Bielek convinced Phil Schneider to start telling his story. He says, you know, you don't have to come out and tell everything, but he said, you really need to start telling the people about some of this stuff that's going on. And that's why I love both these guys, because they stood against the regime, and Phil Schneider gave his life. He was a patriot. And he talked about all the things about Janet Reno being a lesbian, being satanic, basically. This is back in 1995 and 96, mind you, so some of those things obviously are dated now, but you older people will know who I'm talking about. He talked about the Oklahoma City bombing. Timothy McVeigh, I believe it was. He said that was a patsy. He said all this stuff. He said people died for no reason. He said that was set up by the government. He said the only way that the Oklahoma City bombing could happen is with a nuclear type bomb, basically. Type weapon. Maybe I shouldn't say bomb, I don't know, but a nuclear type weapon can melt through that kind of steel. Nothing else really could. Schneider was coming out and saying all this. He was also talking about his experiences with aliens. Well, the government told him, you need to stop talking about it. He wouldn't do it. He also talked about train cars with 147 ramshackles down each side of it, and all these rail cars out in Portland, Oregon. That was for human trafficking to basically feed the reptilian agenda. He said that the New World Order and the alien agenda is one and the same. And he said that that's, you know, it's been going on for a long time. The first time that our government has basically shot down a UFO craft that we know of was 1947 in the Roswell incident. They had been shooting them down roughly about between 1 and 5 every month, approximately since then, according to Schneider. There have been a lot, and it's also all over the world. It's not just in the United States. He said Russia was shooting them down like crazy too. So, and that's why the government is always first on the scene, because if you think about it, they're the ones that are shooting these alien ships down. Remember with Roswell, they talked about, oh, it's just a weather balloon. Well, they found hieroglyphic inscriptions on that. It wasn't foil, it was some kind of alien material that we don't know about. Somewhere way above 109 on the periodic table of the elements. And like I said, Schneider had several examples of that. Well, they killed him. They made 13 attempts on his life. 14. On the 14th time, they got him. He actually did one lecture after the 13th attempt, and it was a pretty heartfelt lecture. You could tell he was sad and kind of heartbroken a little bit. But this guy was a patriot. He wanted to get his story out there. Well, on the 14th attempt, basically, he answered the door, and this came after they tried to kill him in his car how many different times. He answered the door, and basically, this guy only had like 2 or 3 fingers on each hand. He had a catheter from when he was infected with the cancer. He didn't have much time to live. He theorized he only had 6 months to live probably anyway. That's why he was telling this story. Well, they went up there and they strangled him with his own catheter around his neck. Tied it around him, knotted it 3 times. There's no way he could have done that with 2 or 3 fingers on each hand. It's impossible. Well, then I think they shocked him because 2 or 3 days after the fact, his head was all blackened. So they did the worst to him, all because he was a patriot that cared about you guys, and he wanted you to know the truth about the alien agenda and what's really going on with the reptilians, the Dracos, and the Greys. And he talked about the cattle mutilations out in New Mexico and stuff. A lot of those cattle mutilations were done with lasers that literally didn't even cut through the cells. It was so exact, it went between the cells. To date, we don't have that kind of technology. There's another guy by the name of John Lear. 1987, he started talking about this. John Lear is part of the Lear family, the Lear jet, as you guys probably know out there out west in Nevada and stuff. His brother and his dad flew them too. And John Lear talks about all this stuff about the Greys and the alien and the reptilians, and I'll post a link to what he was talking about down there. He also talked about the Boeing 757 that came from the Japan International Airlines incident that flew from Greenland to Anchorage, Alaska. Well, as it's flying from Greenland and crosses into Alaska, there's this massive structure. I mean, a 757 is huge, right? This thing is probably, I'd say, 10 times bigger than that, maybe more than that. And there's a picture of it that John Lear holds up in the video in 1987. It's called On the Record. It was a news show that they did. I'll put a link to it so you guys can watch it. What else is there to talk about? I've talked about Indrid Cold, the Mothman. I'm here in Parkersburg, West Virginia. Most of you guys know about the Mothman. 12 days after Indrid Cold showed up in November 2nd of 1967, I believe, the Mothman shows up 40 miles away in Point Pleasant. Well, you guys probably know the story. The Mothman shows up and terrorizes a lot of people. Doesn't kill anybody, but does kill one large dog. Scares the shit out of a lot of people. Flies it up to 100 miles an hour. What is it really? Well, it originated in Point Pleasant above what's called the TNT plant. And basically the TNT plant is just another name for a lot of Army ordnance bunkers that were no longer in use. Well, my theory is that this is probably a government hybridization project or experiment, maybe between a man and a bat or something like that, like a real life Batman maybe. I can't say that with certainty. I don't know. I'm just guessing. But Mothman, as a creature, as a paranormal entity, has been sighted in other states. So there are more than one. He's been seen in Texas. He's been seen up around Lake Michigan, especially around Chicago. The year 2017, he was heavily sighted around Chicago. A different creature probably, but same type. Well, out here in Point Pleasant, the famous part about it is that the Silver Bridge collapsed in December, I think it was December 12th of 1967, and the Mothman was seen at the top of the Silver Bridge. Well, a lot of people were doing Christmas shopping at that time in their cars. They didn't know what was about to happen. Well, the bridge gave under, and all these people went down in the river and died. So people theorize, was the Mothman about a harbinger of doom or something like that? We don't know. Hard to say exactly. Is it a paranormal or extraterrestrial entity? It could be. We don't know. They do have the Mothman Festival every September in Point Pleasant. I'm going to try to go this year. I think last year it was in September 23rd. So look that up if you're local. You might want to make plans to attend that. There's a couple other things I want to talk about before I wrap this up. So CERN, the particle accelerator, that's down, I believe it's Geneva, Switzerland. Or I think it's Geneva, Switzerland. It's under the ground. And basically, they want to open up portals, or I theorize the gates to hell, the gates of hell. I don't really know, but there's a lot going on with that, and we're not very far off from CERN. I think we're about maybe 1 or 2 years away from CERN supposedly opening up portals. Portals are a real thing. I talked about Al Bielek doing time travel, jumping in one. The technology does exist. The black budget military has it and has had it since 1943. Before we were working on it, Nazi Germany was actually working on their own invisibility experiments involving time travel as well. They didn't have the works of Tesla, but they had the works of all those mathematicians, and they actually accomplished it. They had some German submarines go invisible to radar. Kind of makes you wonder why they didn't win the war, because they had a lot that you didn't know about. And I'll get on the topic of Adolf Hitler a little bit. So I was in Germany in the Army when I saw my UFO ship sighting, July 20th of 2020. That was over the installation Army base of USA Camp Grafenwohl, which is just north of Vilseck, Germany, in Bavaria. And that was the stomping grounds of Hitler. Hitler and the Nuremberg trials, you guys have probably heard about that. What's so odd about the Nürnberg, or Nuremberg, as we like to say in English, trials, was that in the year 1500 something. I want to say it was 1545 maybe. There was a huge, and I'm talking massive, extraterrestrial battle going on in the skies over Nuremberg or Nürnberg. And a lot of people are theorizing right now was that what exactly happened. It was a huge battle in the skies of Germany. Well, when I saw my UFO ship in Graf or Grafenwohl, it actually hit an estimated speed of Mach 6 and it went in the direction of Nürnberg. And it actually was on the news. I didn't know it at the time. I found out a couple of years later it actually hit the news. And I've been trying to search for those articles to show you guys. I'll come across it one day. It was in the newspapers and online. UFO seen in the skies of Nuremberg. That was the same one I saw. Well, Tanya Derenberger, who was my friend who died 2 years ago, she was convinced it was one of Indrid's ships. I believe it was because I had actually asked him if he's real to appear. Well, when I opened this video, I talked about a man by the name of Jake Barber. Don't forget to look him up. He's in the news right now saying that you guys can summon extraterrestrial entities and that he's the one that came across that white tic tac where he became overcome by demonic entities. He said he was possessed. They're not all bad, but his encounter was. In that episode on the X-Files that I was talking about, Season 7, Episode 1, The Sixth Extinction, it talks about a UFO ship buried in the sands of West Africa, and when you got next to it, you were overcome by psychic abilities and maybe demonic powers. I don't know. There's a lot going on. I still don't know. I'm trying to share everything I can with you guys and educate you on all this stuff. I've told you pretty much most of what I know. I'd like to get farther into the Al Bielek conversation, especially in regards to his future time travels. Crop circles. I haven't talked about crop circles yet, so you could accomplish a crop circle with basic planks and boards and stomping down corn stalks. It would take you forever. A lot of the crop circles that have been done in America, the United Kingdom, and even South America are to the extent that no man could create these, and they are communicating with us. On some level, we have deciphered some of the messages. They're very complex, they're very mathematical, they're predictive for the future. I can't remember exactly what I have seen, but if you go look up crop circles and you'll see the real famous image of an actual ET in there, just know it's not artificial intelligence, it's not Photoshop, it's actually a real crop circle. And I'm not sure which race is doing this. I want to say, I don't know. I want to say it's probably one of the good entities. Schneider talked about as many as 11 different civilizations well, the word civilizations can be construed different races of aliens or extraterrestrial biological entities. And I've talked about a few of them. I haven't talked about the Nordic Blondes or the Pleiadians. Those are the good ones. The Pleiadians, they went back to where they came from because they had their own war with the Reptilians and the Greys. So basically, the Reptilians and the Greys are just trying to take over as many planets as they can because they need adrenochrome. Adrenochrome, as you guys know from the Hollywood Satanist elitists, how adrenochrome is produced, many of you already know this, is mostly from smaller children or prepubescent adults, okay? And when you scare the living bejesus out of somebody, it floods their body, particularly their brainstem, with adrenochrome. Well, if you look at your internet engines, one of them is called Chrome. That's actually named after adrenochrome. Chrome was designed, if my memory serves me right, about 1999 or 2000 probably, or not long after that. And yeah, so they were throwing it in our faces. A lot of the Satanists, the Hollywood elitists, it's true. What you've been hearing, they really are actually drinking this stuff, and it helps preserve your youth. It makes it so you don't age rapidly, okay? And I don't know. I theorize that P. Diddy isn't all in this. I mean, most of your Hollywood people are, right? You would have to think so. Michael Jackson, he never really died. There's a video that surfaced of him getting off the coroner's van and going down underground. The day that happened, I think I was a sophomore or a junior in high school. That was about the year 2000 when that happened, if memory serves me correctly, when they announced that Michael Jackson died. He's still the highest grossing music producer of all time, even in supposed death. He still is the highest grossing earner of music. So, he changed his race. Basically, he went from white to black. Essentially, I think he changed his gender. He started looking very effeminate. He had the Neverland Ranch with all those young boys. Now, a lot of people will defend him. They'll say he had nothing to do with it. I don't believe it. I'm sorry. The guy was too weird for me. That's just how I see it. That's pretty much all I want to talk about. I appreciate you guys who have stayed tuned in for this whole video. If there's anything you want me to talk about, hit me up in the comments, and I will come out next week with another video for you. So thanks again, as always, guys. Godspeed. I'll be getting you a Gretchen Fleming video. It was supposed to come out last Friday. I'm behind on it, but it is a really good one, just like our Cindy Ball video that we came out with 2 weeks ago. That got really good views. We're trying to solve murders here in the Mid-Ohio Valley and bring people who have committed these crimes to justice. More on that here Friday night at 9 o'clock. See you guys. Thanks.